Your home for GE2025, Money FM 89.3.
Welcome to GE Tonight on Money FM 89.3. I'm Michelle Martin. It's the final day of campaigning. So we're going to put out there questions that you too might be asking as you think of what you need to know and make your mind up on before you cast your ballot. We've got some great guests back with us in the studio. Nicholas Fang is Managing Director at Strategic Consultancy Black Dot and a former NMP. And also joining us is Dr. Reuben Ng, who is Assistant Professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us. I should point out that we are both also members of the Strategic Communications Expert Panel for MINDEF as well. So glad to see my fellow panel member here this evening.
Nick is a legend. So glad to be sitting on his left.
Oh my, I feel like saluting
left,
now.
Not left,
Wonderful.
left, yeah.
Getting ahead of ourselves here. All right, let's start with some key questions that, people might be thinking through at this point in the campaign. And you at home who are watching or listening can send us your top of mind issues as well, okay? We're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, we're all over the place. First up, let's start with a question that might be foremost on minds, and this is to do with the PAP. Does it need a strong mandate, or do you believe that Singapore needs more opposition voices? Let's have a listen.
If the PAP has a weakened mandate, assuming return to power, but with a weakened mandate, you can be sure there will be people tempted to push us around. It will be harder for us to advance Singapore's interests.
Is a two-thirds majority still a reasonable political goal for the PAP in today's climate, Reuben?
Well, I think the most important point is that it's PM Lawrence Wong's first elections. So being the first elections as Prime Minister, the mandate is very important. Because imagine if he has a strong mandate, he will command the respect of leaders around the world as well as people in Singapore. So I think to him and to the ruling party is an extremely important goal to have that strong mandate.
What do we mean by mandate? I mean, do we risk overusing this word as a political buzzword? What does it really empower a party to do? Do we have clarity on that?
I think that's definitely something to consider because I agree 100% with Reuben in the sense that most political leaders would hope for a strong mandate, whatever that means, because it allows them to act with a little bit more latitude, I feel. It hasn't really been gamed out, I think, in some of our conversations, but what does a weakened mandate mean? It means potentially as a political leader and leader of a party, you'd be keeping one eye on staying in power and then one eye on doing things to lead the country while you are in power. So Singapore, we've seen the incumbent ruling party have sort of the luxury of, pretty much a steady state for 6 decades where they have been in power. And, they then have this latitude to say that nobody's going to suspect that I'm going to act in a populist way. They're not going to try to put pressure on me by stirring up my electorate so that I then come under pressure of whether I can stay in power and continue. So, when he says a strong mandate means that domestically you're strong and then you can just focus on really just getting the job done to the best of their abilities, and that includes interfacing with the external world as well. So I can see why a strong mandate would be important and desirable, but a lot of people from other countries, they look at the results that we have here in Singapore over the years, 60-70% popular vote majority. And they said, that's crazy, some other countries would die, to have that kind of strong mandate. So I think it really does come down to a question of what exactly is a strong mandate.
Yeah. If the opposition, what would be a credible opposition win? I mean, is there a possibility of all opposition parties crossing 40% of the vote share mark? And would that reshape future policy making and strengthen Singapore that way?
It is important to note that this year, incumbent governments have a lot of tailwind, right? So I think there's expectations that incumbent governments will win. So against that background, I think opposition parties, probably what they're hoping for is to keep, especially the Workers' Party, to keep the wards that they have been holding on to. I think that's really important. And I think if they can punch above 40%, and shows eroding support for the ruling party, I think that's a win for them compared to the previous elections.
I want to pick up on a point you mentioned earlier on this idea of strong mandate extending to strong support for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, a mandate for him, because this is a point he referenced in today's Mayday rally. Let's have a listen.
Exactly 1 year ago, right here at this Mayday rally platform, Senior Minister Lee announced that he was passing the baton of leadership to me. You were the first to witness the beginning of this leadership transition. This election will mark the completion of the transition.
So PM Prime Minister Wong delivering the traditional Mayday rally speech on the final day of campaigning, but many are questioning whether it blurred the lines between a national address and a campaign pitch. And given the speech's prominence compared to the 11 party rallies that are being held tonight, does this raise concerns about fairness and balance in election campaigning?
I think it's very hard to dissociate between campaigning and the National Day message. I think it's just really difficult. I mean, it's not an academic exercise here, but I think what Prime Minister Lawrence Wong was trying to do was to take this opportunity to take stock of what has happened so far, because he's speaking directly to a Mayday rally, right? So it's a workers, it's a whole of Singapore kind of thing. So I think it's a very tough balancing act. I think it's impossible to dissociate between different messages during this important time.
Still on the point of that a vote for the opposition weakens the mandate, that argument, let's hear from Ong Yi Kang.
In 2011, the opposition used an analogy called the co-driver. Some of you may remember 2011. They say opposition presence in parliament is like a co-driver, sitting next to PAP, which is the driver. If the PAP driver fall asleep, the co-driver will slap his head, and you will wake up and drive again. But then when the opposition presence grow and expand to another GRC, that co-driver becomes more than a co-driver. It becomes also a backseat driver. So when you drive, he starts giving you instruction, turn left, turn right, stop, slow down. He starts suggesting, why don't you take this route, that route. To the driver, it's still okay. You take in the suggestion, you have your own GPS, you decide the route you take, you are still in charge. But if after this GE, the PAP loses another 3-4 GRCs, then I think likely the co-driver will have one hand on your steering wheel and say, I also want to drive. It will then become very dangerous. We may be at risk of crashing.
With so many seasoned ministers having stepped down, is the PAP vulnerable because its leadership bench is seen as thinner than with previous generations?
I think there are a few issues here, obviously. I think Minister Ong does a really good job with analogies, and he has kind of fleshed out this notion of loss of seats and potentially more GRCs as well, what this could mean for leadership of the country. To build on Reuben's answer a bit earlier, I think there is expectation on a major opposition party like the Workers' Party to keep their momentum going. So if they can take another GRC, I think people would say, right, this is the WP on the ascendance, on the rise. I thought their strategy was a little bit conservative this time, with their major figures not stepping out of the safe Aljunied zone to tackle some other places, but we'll see whether that pays off or not. On the issue of bench strength, I think for sure, we've spoken in the past about the senior figures who have stepped down. We've got Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat, Defence Minister Ng Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean as well. But I think there's very strong message from Prime Minister Lawrence Wong from even as early as last year was his continued focus and drive on renewal, rejuvenation, and refreshing the team. That sort of phrase has even made it to the manifesto this year as well. So I think he has to put his money where his mouth is. He has to demonstrate the willingness to take on new people. And I think he's made a quite compelling case that it's not about staffing up just for this current term of government and the cabinet, but bring in people who will learn the ropes and then potentially staff up future cabinets as well. So that's why we've seen this very aggressive new slate come in, and inevitably some people have got to make space for these new people to come in.
So, a vote for the opposition is being framed as a hindrance for the advancement of Singapore's interests. Will more voices in Parliament weaken the government's ability to advocate for Singapore's interests? And this ties in also with a listener question, which we'll put to the both of you. In the US, we've seen chaos a democracy that can create in Parliament. Would it be more beneficial to have Parliament split into three rather than two majorities like the PAP and WP as a safety net? Quite a hypothetical there, but what do you think?
I think let's go back to Ong Ye Kung's a very interesting car analogy. I don't know. For me, I'm a little bit more futuristic, so I'm thinking about driverless cars, right? Self-driving vehicles. Now, if a self-driving vehicle, then everyone is discussing about the strategy ahead, right? Because the mechanics of it is driving forward. But it's important to note that it is not a PAP car or WP car. It's a Singapore car, right? So because it's a Singapore car, then you need different constituents, different minds, Singaporean minds in that car to think of the strategy forward. And this really good question about whether should it be two or three. I think different countries are at different political maturities. I think it's not possible for Singapore overnight to become like the US, or nor we want it to be, right? So I think the political scene in Singapore is really maturing. And, I've been thinking about whether succession planning is really overrated. But then I went back to the Ong Ye Kung's car analogy, right? As I think it's a Singapore car. And I hope we won't be just being one car, right? I hope we have a fleet of cars. And I hope these senior ministers who are stepping down will be in cars nearby, because we really need to be driving together towards a very uncertain future.
I did not think we'd be talking about driverless cars on
I
this
just
show,
want to say
but
I
that's a
prefer
great analogy.
bicycles. I prefer bicycles. But I think that's a really good point as well. And I think just to pick up on something that Reuben made, a point that Reuben made was this comparison potentially to systems that we see overseas. And I think that, not to prolong the car analogy, but if we had one driver in one term of government driving the car in one direction, and in the next term somebody else wins, we flip over and the direction changes, then we lose something that has been a unique aspect of Singapore as a country, as a society, as a government, which is the stability and the coherence of policies over a very long term. And that's why we've managed to attract investment and commitment from business partners, stakeholders to build hubs, because people believe that what the government says today will most likely hold in 10, 15, 20,
But you're
maybe
assuming
even 30
that the
years.
hand on the steering wheel is going to drive us off the sidewalk.
Potentially so, and
that might not
came
be
to
the
me
case,
because
right?
of what you described in the US, when we see things changing, executive orders being written to overturn what the previous term of government did. So using that as the potential, highway situation, something that we are definitely not used to in Singapore, and not entirely sure that will what that spells for Singapore's current reputation and brand around the world.
Fair point. Next, let's look at an issue that matters to voters of Punggol. So Gan Kim Yong has defended his role in the aborted income alliance deal, saying the Workers' Party had a chance to raise this in Parliament last year but didn't. And the issue has resurfaced with Workers' Parties raising it. Former NTUC Income Chief Executive Officer Tan Swee Chair questioning Gan Kim Yong's oversight as he was MAS chair at the time. Do you think this controversy could contribute to costing Gan Kim Yong his seat in Punggol? And what does this say around voter expectations of accountability and transparency?
Well, I think this is an election, so every party is playing to win. I think that's important to note. So whatever strategies different parties are taking, we need to think about them trying to win, right?
Yeah.
That said, I think it brings up an issue that has been talked about. Question is whether voters would think about these national issues, right? Because voters vote for different reasons. It could be municipal reasons, it could be cost of living, it could be national issues like this. So I'm not quite sure where it would land. I think it may sway some voters, but probably not all, because really different strokes for different folks.
What happens? Yes, go
I
ahead.
think there's a little bit of fallout also in Jalan Kayu for Ng Chi Ming. who is Sec-Gen of the NTUC, and both him and DPM Gan have been sort of targets in this vein of attack using the NTUC Income Alliance saga as well. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for those two wards.
What would happen if our DPM was not re-elected as minister?
I think the depletion of that wise bench strength will be impacted further, given his experience. We've heard it talked a lot about by even Prime Minister Lawrence himself about how he's worked really well with DPM Gan during the COVID task force, and now he's the task force man, right? Because of the tariff or the tariff task force or task force on economic resilience. So I think that will definitely cause a little bit of disruption. At a time when ostensibly, I think Prime Minister Lawrence leading the 4G team, even though DPM Gan has also said that he's not really a 4G leader, he will lose a very trusted hand that he has worked very well with. And I think that will, of course, cause a little bit more challenges for the team.
Next, the key issue on voters' minds, the rising cost of living. Will current policies be able to effectively tackle that, or are we ripe for change? Let's have a listen to Grace Fu.
Decisions like GST is never easy. We know the pain on the low and no income people. And that is why it came with a permanent system, a permanent support system. Not one time, not transitional. As the opposition would tell you, it's permanent support system. GST vouchers, cash, $850. GST Medisave, $450. GST USave, $380. GST SNCC rebates. All this together to offset that 2% increase. This is equivalent to spending of 80,000 people, $80,000. We may be taking a chicken wing from you, but we are giving you a whole chicken.
The minister said they take a chicken wing but give a whole chicken, but we're not fooled. We can see with our eyes what's really happening.
Okay, so there's Grace Fu followed by Paul Tambaya there.
You've gone from cars to chickens.
Exactly, we had to liven things up. The reality is there's been a spike in our experience of the cost of food, the cost of a home, the cost of car ownership, right? So is Grace Fu's whole chicken metaphor been effective, or is it tone deaf in today's environment?
I'm not sure about tone deaf. I think analogies are always tricky, right? Either they land or they don't, and either people buy into it and remember it, or it becomes a meme the next day. I myself am not entirely sure about the chicken. I think the car analogy worked a lot better for me. But I think at a certain point, you also can't really get too sidetracked by the rhetoric. And, I know the opposition likes to pick up on it and make fun of it because it's easy to do. But if you understand the policy which the incumbent government has taken pains to try to explain, the fact that the GST stepped increase happened in 2023, 2024, but since 2022, we've actually seen inflation come down off record highs, and it seems to be on a downtrend as well. So it's potentially, economically, in terms of macroeconomics doesn't really gel, that kind of rhetoric to say that GST is turbocharging. I think that's one of the terms that they use, inflation. But it is an emotive, issue that people take to heart, and all I can do is relate to my lived experience. And this morning, I went for lunch. I had cai peng, and my wife ordered this economic rice. And she said, "How much was it?" And I said, "Yours was $4.70." And she was like, "Oh, that's not too bad. I mean, it's probably a little bit higher than maybe a couple of years ago, but to me, it was still okay."
I agree, Nick. I think cost of living issues are very emotive, right? They almost a lightning rod. I'm no reference to any parties here, but it's something really real, right? I mean, you go buy your coffee, it has increased by how many cents? You go buy your eggs, you buy your chicken rice. I mean, talk about chicken. It's really interesting that she spoke about chicken. I go quite a bit to Mongolia, and there was one winter I went, it was minus 46 degrees. It was so cold. And they tell me there that actually lamb is more expensive. Lamb is much cheaper than chicken because chicken cannot survive minus 46 degrees.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this, but sometimes like what Nick said, sometimes it can fall flat about the chicken and chicken wing. But I think most importantly is what are we going to do about it? How are you comforting a population that is very affected by the cost of living, and how can we sort of move forward with this and after the elections?
I was in Mongolia at minus 46 degrees as well, and there was a lot of lamb in the buffets, I have to say. Very
Everything
little
is
chicken
lamb.
and no seafood.
Even the dumpling is lamb tail. Eh?
But, we were so lucky to be able to have food where we were in Mongolia. Now, the opposition has raised how sensible, they've raised questions. How sensible was it to raise GST at a time when prices were already rising? The flip side is how much blame or credit can the government realistically take when the backdrop of inflation is global?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, you have the incumbent's curse, right? Where if you've been an incumbent for a long time, everything is your fault. And ostensibly, everything that's good, nobody appreciates anymore because you've been around for such a long time. So to pile on every sort of blame onto the incumbent, potentially not fair, but I can see why it's a tactic that the opposition would use. Now, the opposition have their own challenges too, right? The challengers have their own challenges in the sense that they can share a lot of plans, but none of them have been road tested. And as long as the PAP, the incumbent, continues to form the government, it's really hard to ever point to something and say, look at this policy, that's our policy, and it actually works, which then allows the incumbent to say, right, you guys are just talking, we are the ones doing, and you're the guys just talking. So I think that sort of gridlock will tend to persist for a while, especially given the current situation. I think there's some confidence that the PAP should form the next government. Fairly, the WP would say that they're not challenging for enough seats to even deny the PAP a supermajority. But yeah, it's a question maybe depending on how some of the other opposition parties do, there is always a chance that the PAP might not have a supermajority.
Mm-hmm. So real problems like rising cost of living require real solutions. And I imagine the voter, before they make that check mark, thinking, have I heard real solutions? Let's take a listen to Ong Kang now.
PAP candidates, we are always held to very high standards because we are the ruling party and we accept that. But opposition candidates aspiring to have a presence in parliament cannot just be all sound and fury either. Surely they must also be held to certain standards. For example, voters may consider, have they demonstrated their abilities to run a town council properly? Are they able to come out with sound, coherent, sensible policies that's different from today's policy but an alternative, and able to present them well in a way that you can understand so that you have a basis of comparison? Can they do that?
Surely access to data determines the quality of your contribution to policy solutions. So do you think that voters hold the opposition to the same standard that they hold the PAP to when we talk about road-tested policy solutions?
I think when it comes to data evidence, of course, the ruling party has so much data, right? Because they've been governing Singapore in the last 60 years. So there's a lot more to pick. I think there's a lot more data to unpack and things like that. The Workers' Party has been also in Parliament for some time. I think probably the PAP will be judged by the parliamentary speeches, how they voted, and also the track record in the last 60 years. The Workers' Party, I think probably parliamentary speeches, how many times they've voted, who has spoken up more, and things like that. So I think it's a very sort of uneven kind of playing field. That said, I think the evidence and data are there, and Singaporeans, I think, are looking at whether life has improved for them on a variety of different issues. And one top of mind and top of heart now seems to be the cost of living.
When we talk about the place of the opposition, we've heard arguments that the opposition is not here to take over government, they're here to check the government, right? Does the system already provide for alternative voices with the NCMP and MP seats? Let's take a listen.
This is where the PAP wants to keep the opposition. They don't want elected opposition MPs, and I know why. Because only an elected opposition MP can pressure and push the government. An NCMP They were a function of what had transpired after certain important political changes that happened in Singapore in 1988. At that point, there was a cacophony of voices who wanted more opposition in Parliament, and I think it was almost like a checking mechanism to make sure the momentum was slowed down. But make no mistake about it, you need elected opposition MPs in Parliament. If you want them to speak up faithfully and to be connected to the ground, rooted to the ground, they have to be elected into Parliament.
Nick, speaking from experience, are the challenges you can mount as an NMP fairly different from the challenge you can make as an elected member of Parliament?
I think for NMPs and what Pritam was talking about, NCMPs, obviously you don't have the mandate, right? We started out talking about the mandate. You don't have the elected mandate. You cannot say you necessarily represent a group of constituents who have put their vote for you. And you can represent certain, constituents in the sense that you have, I spoke out a lot on sports, on defense, on international affairs, on the media. You have arts and culture quite often represented. We even had a sustainability focused NMP as well. So on this notion of raising ideas, challenging conventions, questioning policy, you can do all of that, right? You can vote on most things except for, significant stuff to do with the reserves and amendments to the Constitution. But I think, to disagree a little bit with what Pritam is saying, the NCMP scheme, I think, does have some value for the opposition beyond allowing Singaporeans to hear more diverse voices. And NCMPs who come in and who make use of their opportunity to speak up in the House, to establish their brand, their position. I'm thinking Leong Man Wai and Hazel Phua for PSP. They have built credibility and at least a brand around on the national stage. And now in West Coast Jurong West, we have the PSP A team, which have these two PSP NCMPs and also PSP Chairman Tan Cheng Bock, forming what looks to be a fairly credible and formidable, opposition to the PAP in West Coast. So I think there is value for the NCMP scheme. It shouldn't just be poo-pooed in that sense. On the issue of whether NMPs should step down and then run for elections, I have my own views on that, but potentially it's for another conversation.
We still have half an hour, Nick. So. All right. What do you think is important to keep in mind, the kind of Singapore we want, and not get caught up in what's been a pretty packed 9 days of campaigning?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just reflecting the other day. So to be very honest, before this election, I was quite apathetic. I wasn't really thinking much about the issues, who to vote for, until this time when I was doing more analysis and commentating, right? So I've also seen my own growth. So I think one of the important questions among many questions that have been swirling in my mind, the question is who has brought up the issues that are most important to me, that resonates most strongly with me, right? So I think that's probably something to consider as we go to vote on Saturday.
Yeah.
One of the issues that haven't been quite brought up as much, I think, is mental health. So mental health had a smattering of different candidates bringing up, but I felt that it didn't have that sort of airing that I hope we would have. I recall that I was in a very bad place several years ago when I was in the UK because it was my first encounter with winter. It was so cold. I couldn't take the cold, and I was applying for my PhD in the US. So I remember I was just so embarrassed because I was going to apply for a PhD in public health, but I misspelled it, became a PhD in pubic health. So it was terrible. So I remember there were schools in the Midwest of the US that I applied to. They actually called me up for an interview. At the time, it was still a Skype interview, right? They said, "Oh, Reuben, you've identified a very important area of study, but unfortunately, we don't have it right now. Why don't you try again next year?" I thought that was really below the belt, right? But anyway, issues like this, right? Different issues resonate with different people, okay? So I think it's important to ask which party aligns with the issues I care about, which parties aligns with the values that I care about. And voting is a really serious affair. I think it's important to vote mindfully, not mindlessly.
And I did not think gynecology would come in this discussion either, but what do you think voters are going to keep front of mind?
Yeah, I think, I look at the potential sort of focus areas, right? So you have policies, you have the parties, and then at the same time you have the personalities. And I think in the course of the past few weeks, and especially throughout this campaign period, we've seen focus on all three different areas. Potentially a little bit less on policy, a lot more on the party brand, and then to a certain extent a lot more on the personalities. And I've been looking at some of the excitement, and I think I'm glad that we are at cooling off day tomorrow, given that we've had quite a bit of excitement, especially on the online social media digital space as well. But I think one thing that I hope people take away as they go into cooling off day and then into polling day on Saturday is that first and foremost we have to understand this is an election. Parties, as Reuben was saying earlier, they play to win, right? You're here to compete hard, and your aim is to win the election. So, gloves come off. It can be a little bit bruising. Rhetoric that we in slightly staid, kind of sanitized Singapore may not be so used on the political stage comes a little bit sharper. Elbows become a little bit sharper. But this is part of the game, and I think the scary thing for me is that if we look at political contestations around the world, it's becoming quite bruising, and politicians are getting better at using rhetoric to stir up emotions, to get people to feel that, oh, actually my life kind of sucks, and it must be this guy's fault, and since this is the new guy, he's going to bring change. We've seen that in countries like the US. Hopefully that doesn't seep in here, because I think at the end of the day, on Sunday and then on Monday, everybody's kind of got to come back together again as a country, and to deal with a slightly more contested, challenging environment that we see around the world. So let's just get through these next few days and remember that we're all still neighbors, we all still get along, and whatever you see on TikTok or Instagram may not necessarily be the real world. So let's just get through these elections, and as Reuben said, vote mindfully and not mindlessly.
Beautifully said. Yeah, well, the power is in your hands with your vote to shape the kind of Singapore you want and endorse the kind of leadership you want. So I hope we've given you some good food for thought. The show is far from over. It's a changed political landscape when you're laughing out loud during the elections. I just love the fact that there's so much political humor out there. We're going to tap into what social media is talking about with Thekla Lee in just a while.
As Singapore heads to the polls, Money FM 89.3 brings you front row access to GE 2025 with insights from experts and analysis of the issues that matter to you. Stay ahead with Money FM 89.3.
All right, let's enter what seems to be the parallel universe of viral memes and great banter. Thekla, what are people talking about?
Hello. Well, as always, we're here to break down what's been trending online this campaign season. But today, we're going to start off on a bit more of a serious note. So, Michelle, every woman likes to be called pretty. But obviously, it kind of crosses the line when that's all that people see, and our female politicians are being reduced to just their looks rather than their leadership. And that's a huge problem that we've been seeing this campaign season. So what we've seen is a handful of our female candidates like Alexis Dang, Eileen Chang, and San Xueling, and they've been the subject to online posts that compare their appearances and not their policies. And so, for example, San Xueling and Alexis Dang are running against each other in Punggol GRC, and it has been named the Goddess Showdown, with a lot of comments saying that they will vote for either one of the candidates, mostly because they are more of their type, rather than because of their policies. And thankfully, this has sparked a strong pushback. One of the more prominent posts came from Anna Hautanto, a respected female leader, who wrote a post titled, "Singapore's Female Politicians Deserve Better." And many others echoed that sentiment, leaving comments to call it the objectification and remind everyone that our women in politics deserve respect, not rankings. And Workers' Party Chair Sylvia Lim spoke on this during a recent walkabout, speaking as what she likes to call herself a proud mama bear of her party's growing female representation. And here's what she had to say.
First of all, attracting women candidates is always more difficult. There's a lot of hesitation sometimes, and women also tend to be very critical of themselves. They think like, am I good enough? Can I imagine myself debating in Parliament, debating a minister? Can I think on my feet? These are all very good questions to ask, and it would be such a wasted opportunity if voters do not realize this and realize how urgent it is for us to promote this aspect of our parliamentary representation.
Well, on a lighter note, there is one meme. If there was a meme to sum up GE 2025, it might just be our singing politicians. And from campaign jingles to walkabout karaoke, this election season has truly hit, wait for it, a high note. So we're bringing this up because we know that it kind of annoys Nick to talk about singing politicians. And it looks like we're ending the way that we started with a song, this time from PAP's Edwin Tong, who was roped into a buskers performance doing a walkabout at Bedok North Market. It wasn't a planned performance, just a natural moment, but it did leave the internet smiling, and we actually have a small snippet of that, so brace yourselves.
All together now.
Everything I wonder what to be is not coming true, especially for me. And the reason is clear.
So, Nick, thoughts?
Okay, actually, that wasn't too bad. I think it's actually better than the busker, if I'm going to be brutally
That was in
honest.
tune.
I thought- yeah, exactly.
It was in
which is
tune.
more than what you can say for some politicians who have posted stuff this season.
Okay, well, let's finally talk about one of the viral trends taking over social media lately, and these are the politician dating profiles. Now, when you really think about it, voting is kind of like dating. You assess your options, figure out who aligns best with your values and life goals, and then eventually make a choice that hopefully leads to a healthy long-term commitment. Eh?
This is like a Rorschach test. I'm learning so much about you, Tekla, but okay. All right.
Well, some of our favorites of these dating profiles that we've seen Singaporeans make of their favorite candidates include a profile of Lawrence Wong saying that on his bio, I can play the guitar, but I won't play with your future. Looking for a long-term relationship and peace and stability. And there's another one of Chee Soon Juan saying that he loves fresh starts and making plans. Well, Singaporeans have found this trend to be quite humanizing for our politicians, with some comments even saying that this made the candidates' policies more digestible. But now we're going to turn the tables for a second. We have Nicholas Fang and Reuben Ng on the panel tonight, and it would be a huge waste to not put them on the spot, considering that they're both quite the pun masters.
Oh, yes.
So let me pose this question to the both of you. Could you come up with your own dating profile for one of the politicians running this GE? We'll start with you, Reuben.
Well, I must confess that I've been out of the dating game for a long time. The last time I was in, my dating profiles were typically in Korean and Japanese. So writing it in English is quite a stretch, but I'll try. The politician I'm focused on is Mr. Goh Meng Seng. So this is really tongue-in-cheek. So the bio, right, is I'm straight, straightforward. I'm pro-choice. Looking for group dates at Tampines, not Marine Parade. Preferably, no abandonment issues.
That's so good.
That's a pretty good one. And you, Nick?
Oh, I had one for our favorite DPM task force man, Gan Kim Yong. His bio says he's good at multitasking and being very forceful. He enjoys a terrific time. And he's looking for, and this is tongue-in-cheek, DPM Gan, please don't hate me. He's looking for strangers in the night. Hashtag not a stranger.
Well, that's all from us for tonight's social media wrap. I'm going to give it back to you, Michelle.
Oh, I don't know how anybody can follow that. That was so good, guys. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Nicholas Fang, MD at Strategic Consultancy Black Dot, and former NMP, Dr. Reuben Ng, poet and assistant professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. This is our final check-in with you. Can you believe it? Before we head to the polls, it's been such a privilege to be with you. But do join us for our penultimate show that happens on Sunday, 11 a.m. when we unpack all the results and what this means for the future of Singapore. On behalf of everybody here in the studio, I'm Michelle Martin. You've been watching GE and listening to GE Tonight.
GE 2025, only on Money FM 89.3. Tune in to GE Tonight at 7 p.m. every night on Money FM 89.3 for all the latest news and developments as Singapore prepares to head to the polls.
Money FM 89.3. Well, my friend, Let the music play on. Everybody sing, everybody